It was a quiet, almost eerie night at a gas station on the outskirts of town. The lights flickered as a lone woman, Ava, stood by her car, pumping gas into the tank. The air was cool, and the only sounds were the hum of the pumps and the occasional rustle of the wind. Eva's expression was calm, almost detached, as if the world around her was simply passing by. But little did she know the night was about to take a dramatic turn. Out of nowhere, a group of loud motorcycles roared into the station, their engines shaking the air. The riders, dressed in leather and tattoos, looked like they were straight out of a biker gang movie. They pulled up beside Eva's car, their stares lingering just a bit too long. At first, Eva didn't think much of it. She was used to the occasional glance or rude comment from strangers. But tonight felt different. Tonight, the tension in the air was palpable. One of the bikers, a tall man with a scruffy beard, stepped off his bike and sauntered over to her. "Hey there, sweetheart," he said, leaning against the pump. "You lost or just looking for a little company?" Ava's heart skipped a beat. Something about the way he said it made her uneasy. She kept her eyes forward, trying to ignore him. But he wasn't having it. The other bikers chuckled, watching the scene unfold with amusement. They were having fun, clearly unaware that Eva was about to show them a side of herself they never could have imagined. The man moved closer, now standing right beside her. "I don't think you want to be alone out here, darling. You know, I could show you a real good time." Eva stood frozen for a moment, taking in a slow, deep breath. This wasn't the first time she'd encountered people like this, but tonight, something felt different. A strange calmness washed over her as she turned her head, meeting the man's eyes for the first time. "What do you think you're doing?" she asked, her voice soft but sharp enough to make him pause. The biker raised an eyebrow, clearly caught off guard. He had no idea who she was. None of them did. They just saw a woman vulnerable in the dark and took it as an opportunity. But Ava wasn't just any woman, and soon they would find out. Eva stood there, her eyes unwavering, her grip tightening slightly on the gas pump. The moment of tension hung in the air, but the quiet confidence in her demeanor was something few would have expected, especially not from someone who appeared so unassuming. But Ava had lived a life few could imagine. As she glanced back at the biker, her mind wandered briefly to a time long ago, to a past that she never talked about, to a part of her life that the world had forgotten. Ava was not just any ordinary woman. She was Keanu Reeves' mother, but that fact meant little to her now. In the world of flashing cameras and red carpets, she had always stayed out of the spotlight, preferring a simple, quiet life away from the chaos that her son's fame brought. Back in the early years, when Keanu was just starting to get noticed in Hollywood, Eva had been a young woman full of dreams. She had raised Keanu as a single mother after a tough separation from his father. Life hadn't been easy, and there were moments of struggle when the world felt overwhelming. But Ava always managed to hold it together. Her love for her son was the one constant, the anchor that kept her grounded. She had once been the picture of youthful optimism, but time and experience had chipped away at that facade. As Keanu's career took off, Eva retreated into the shadows. She didn't crave fame or attention. In fact, she avoided it at all costs, choosing instead to live modestly in a small house outside of Los Angeles, far from the flashing lights and public scrutiny that came with being associated with one of the world's most beloved actors. She worked hard, never asking for anything from anyone, and found peace in the simplicity of life. Her relationship with Keanu was always strong, but they both knew that his world was not hers. Yet even in this quiet, secluded life, there were moments of longing. Moments when Eva wished she could relive her younger years before everything changed, before the world knew her son's name. Still, she remained steadfast. She never complained, never let anyone see how deeply the loneliness sometimes stung. The years had molded her into someone who was no longer just the woman behind the scenes, but someone who had built her own identity, strong, self-sufficient, and unyielding. And now, standing at this gas station, Eva wasn't just a woman, at the mercy of some rude bikers. She was a mother who had been through too much to back down now. As she stood there holding her ground, she could feel the tension from the group of bikers surrounding her. The leader, the one who had spoken first, was still staring at her, his expression now a mix of confusion and curiosity. He couldn't figure her out. He had expected fear, submission, or at least some sort of reaction. But what he got was something far different. Eva's life had taught her to remain calm in the face of adversity, to never show weakness, even when she felt cornered. It was a lesson that had served her well over the years, both as a mother and as a woman who refused to be anyone's victim. One of the other bikers, noticing the change in the air, stepped forward. "Come on, man, she's not worth it. Let's get out of here," he said, a touch of concern in his voice. But the leader, still caught up in his bravado, wasn't ready to back down. He took a step toward Eva, his voice dropping lower. "You, sure you don't want some company? It's not every day you meet someone like me." Eva's eyes narrowed. She was done with the games. "I told you once." "I'm not interested," she said, her tone now sharp and resolute. The biker paused, his eyes flicking to the other members of the group, who seemed increasingly uncomfortable. They were starting to realize something wasn't right. What they didn't know was that Eva wasn't the kind of woman they could intimidate, and it was time they learned that lesson the hard way. The air seemed to grow heavier with each passing second. Eva's eyes were steady, unblinking, and her posture remained rigid like a statue carved from steel. Her calmness, though unsettling to the bikers, was a signal of something far more intense beneath the surface. The leader of the group, the tall one with the scruffy beard, stepped forward again, this time with a more menacing grin. "I don't think you understand, lady. We don't take no for an answer around here." One of the other bikers, a younger guy with messy black hair and a sleeve of tattoos covering his arm, exchanged nervous glances with the others. They were starting to sense that this wasn't just some random woman. They could feel the weight of the situation shifting. There was something about her presence that didn't fit. It was as if they were standing in front of someone who had seen and endured far worse than they could ever imagine. "All right, enough of this," the younger biker muttered, stepping back a bit. He clearly wasn't comfortable with what was happening, but the leader wasn't finished. "Stay out of this, Tony. She's just playing hard to get," the leader sneered, moving even closer to Eva, his eyes narrowing as if he were about to prove a point. His hand reached out, brushing against the side of her car. "Tell me, what's a lady like you doing out here alone anyway?" Eva didn't flinch. Instead, she stared at the hand that had just touched her car, the warmth of it still lingering in the air. She took a deep breath, her mind racing. She had dealt with rude people and unwanted attention before, but this was different. These men had no idea who they were messing with. They didn't know the history of the woman they were taunting, nor the fact that she could bring everything crashing down if she wanted to. "Get your hand off my car," she said, her voice now low and controlled, like a quiet storm before the thunder. The biker leader's grin faded for a moment, replaced with a hint of irritation. He looked back at his group, then turned to face Eva again, his posture shifting slightly. But he wasn't done pushing. "You sure you don't want to reconsider, sweetheart?" he pressed, clearly hoping to break her resolve. But Eva was no longer playing along. The tension was rising, and she could feel the frustration of being cornered building inside her. This was not a situation that was going to end well for anyone if it continued. She had spent too many years trying to avoid attention, trying to protect her son from the chaos of fame. But now, in this moment, she couldn't allow herself to shrink away. Not when she was being disrespected, not when these men had no idea who they were dealing with. "I said, get your hand off my car," Eva repeated, this time with more force in her voice. The words hung in the air like a final warning. The group of bikers paused, the moment stretching into an uncomfortable silence. The tension was palpable, and for a brief second, it seemed like time had frozen. The leader looked at her, then at his crew, his bravado slowly starting to crack. He could feel the shift in the energy around him, the sense that maybe, just maybe, he had pushed this too far. Before he could respond, Eva reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. The action was swift, purposeful. She tapped a few buttons, her fingers moving with precision. The bikers watched her, confused, uncertain. They had no idea what was going on, but they had a feeling it wasn't something they wanted to mess with. "I'm calling someone," she said, her voice cool and detached. She didn't explain who it was, but the way she spoke, like she had all the power, made the bikers uneasy. The leader's smirk faltered, and for a moment it seemed as though he wasn't sure if he should back off or press on. As she stood there making the call, a thought crossed Eva's mind. She had always hoped she wouldn't have to pull this card, that she could live her life quietly without her son's fame casting a shadow over her. But tonight, the circumstances were different. These men had made a dangerous assumption that she was just another defenseless woman, and they were about to learn that they were very, very wrong. The moment stretched on, but Ava's demeanor never wavered. Her fingers danced over the screen of her phone, making sure every move was deliberate. The bikers, still unsure of how to react, exchanged uneasy glances. The leader, who had been so sure of himself just moments ago, now seemed to hesitate. There was something in the air that he couldn't shake. For a brief second, Eva's phone rang, and the sound cut through the silence like a sudden gust of wind. The bikers froze, waiting for her to speak. "Hello?" Eva's voice was steady, her tone calm but commanding. "Eva, are you okay?" The voice on the other end was familiar, calm, soothing, and full of concern. It was unmistakable, the voice of a man who had been part of her life for decades. Eva felt the familiar rush of emotions as she listened. This was the moment. She could already sense the change in the atmosphere, the subtle tension that rippled through the bikers group. The leader still hadn't figured it out, but Ava's calm confidence was starting to rattle him. "Yeah, I'm fine," Eva replied, glancing up at the group of men. "Just had a little trouble at the gas station, but I think I'm going to need a bit of backup." The leader tilted his head, his confusion growing. He couldn't hear the conversation clearly, but he could see the way Eva's posture shifted, the way she spoke to the person on the other end, as if she knew exactly how this was going to play out. And then it hit him. He realized he had made a massive mistake. The phone call ended with a simple, "Okay, I'll be there in a minute." And Eva slipped her phone back into her pocket with casual grace, never breaking eye contact with the bikers. "All right," she said coolly. "You guys might want to back off now. My son's on his way." The words hung in the air like a bomb ready to explode. The leader's face turned pale as realization dawned on him. He hadn't connected the dots until now. The calm, controlled manner with which she handled the situation, the way she had picked up the phone without hesitation. It all made sense now. This wasn't just some random woman. This was someone far more important than they had ever imagined. The bikers began to shift uneasily, exchanging glances. Eva's simple declaration had done what none of their attempts to intimidate her had. The group of tough men, who had been so confident in their dominance, now seemed to shrink under the weight of the truth they had just uncovered. "You're," the leader stammered, his bravado disappearing. "You're Keanu Reeves's mother?" Eva nodded, her eyes cold and unwavering. "That's right." The leader stood motionless, his jaw slack with disbelief. He had no idea who he was dealing with, and now it was too late to turn back. The younger biker, Tony, who had seemed uncomfortable from the start, took a step back. "Man, we didn't know." His voice trailed off, guilt and embarrassment washing over him. The others stood frozen, unable to comprehend the shift in their fortunes. Eva took a slow, deliberate breath, her posture unchanged. "You didn't think to ask, did you?" she said quietly. "You just assumed I was someone you could push around." The tension between them was thick now, the group of bikers starting to feel the weight of their own actions. Eva's presence, once so calm and composed, had now transformed into something more powerful. She wasn't just any ordinary woman at a gas station anymore. She was a mother, someone who had seen far more than any of these men could fathom. And now they were the ones who were vulnerable. "I'm going to give you one chance," she continued, her voice sharp, cutting through the thick silence. "Apologize now." The bikers, especially the leader, seemed to shrink under her gaze, the harsh reality of their mistake sinking in. They had crossed a line they hadn't even known existed, and now they were paying the price. The air crackled with tension. The bikers stood there, frozen, unsure of what to do next. The leader, once so full of bravado, seemed to shrink under Ava's unwavering gaze. He had expected a quick and easy win, a woman intimidated by a group of tough men. Instead, he had found himself face to face with someone far stronger, someone who had far more to lose than he could ever understand. Eva's words hung in the air like a heavy fog. Apologize now. For a long moment there was only silence. The leader's face was a mixture of confusion and regret, his lips parting as if searching for the right thing to say, but unable to find the words. He had made the wrong call. He had misjudged her badly. Eva didn't break eye contact. She stood tall, her posture firm, as though the very air around her bent to her will. Her phone had barely been put away before she had set the entire situation in motion, and now she was in control. In this moment, she was untouchable. The bikers had underestimated her, and now they were learning the hard way. Tony, the younger biker who had been reluctant from the start, stepped forward cautiously. His eyes darted nervously between Eva and his gang. We didn't know, okay? We didn't mean any harm, he stammered, his voice trembling. His face was flushed with embarrassment. He could see now that this wasn't just a chance encounter, it was a reckoning. The leader, still looking like a deer caught in the headlights, finally found his voice. I didn't know, he muttered, almost as if apologizing to himself more than to Eva. I didn't realize who you were. Eva's eyes softened ever so slightly, but her stance didn't falter. She knew that apology wasn't for her, it was for them. The bikers had been brought face to face with the consequences of their actions, and they were clearly rattled. You didn't think to ask, she said again, her voice now quieter, more reflective. You assumed, and that's the problem with people like you. The bikers exchanged uneasy glances. It was clear that the reality of the situation was finally sinking in. They had been careless, and their careless behavior had just led them into a mess they weren't prepared for. Eva's thoughts briefly flashed back to when Keanu was younger, how she had spent countless nights trying to protect him from the dangers of the world. She remembered all the times she had tried to keep his life as normal as possible, away from the chaos that came with his fame. But tonight, as she stood here at the mercy of these bikers, she realized that it wasn't just her son who needed protection. It was herself, too. This moment, though jarring, was one where she had to draw the line. Keanu was always there for her, a source of strength when the world felt heavy. But tonight, it was her turn to stand tall. As if on cue, the roar of an engine echoed down the empty road, louder and closer with every passing second. The bikers, who had been nervously eyeing one another, suddenly looked towards the source of the sound. The leader's face twisted in confusion. He hadn't seen it coming, but it was unmistakable. The familiar, unmistakable growl of a powerful engine was nearing fast. Eva's expression remained unreadable. She didn't need to look back to know who was coming. She could feel it. The way the earth seemed to tremble just slightly, the way her heart beat a little faster, knowing exactly who would come through that darkened road. As the motorcycle screeched into the parking lot, a figure stepped off the bike. Tall, effortlessly cool, with the same striking features that had been captured in millions of photographs over the years. Keanu Reeves. The bikers were now fully aware of the gravity of the situation. They were no longer just facing a woman with a strong will. They were facing the mother of a man who could make or break them, and suddenly they realized how badly they had misjudged their opponent. Keanu's calm presence filled the space. He didn't look angry. He didn't need to. His mere presence was enough to let the bikers know that the line had been crossed. Eva's son had arrived, and there was no way out now. "You all right, Mom?" Keanu asked softly, his voice warm, but steady, never showing any trace of fear or aggression. He had seen enough in his life to know when things had gone too far. Eva nodded, her gaze never leaving the group of bikers. "I'm fine," she said, her voice just a whisper, but one that carried a weight none of them could deny. Keanu looked at the leader of the gang, his eyes cool and measured. "I think you've overstayed your welcome," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. The leader gulped, his face pale. "We didn't mean any harm. We were just having some fun," he stammered, his bravado completely evaporated. "Now," Eva stepped forward, her voice strong once more. "Fun? Harassing a woman is fun to you?" Her voice was sharp, cutting through the air like a blade. "You think it's a game?" Keanu's eyes locked onto the leader. "No one messes with my family," he said, his voice low, controlled. every word laced with a quiet, undeniable power. The bikers, now fully aware of who they were dealing with, shifted uncomfortably. Some were still trying to recover from the shock of it all, others just standing there completely defeated. The leader, defeated and embarrassed, held up his hands in surrender. "We're leaving, sorry, we didn't know." Without another word, they all mounted their bikes and sped off into the night, their engines roaring as they disappeared into the distance. The silence that followed felt heavy but somehow peaceful. Keanu turned to his mother, offering her a small, reassuring smile. "You all right?" Eva smiled back, her heart still pounding but filled with a sense of pride. "I'm fine, I handled it." And with that, the two stood together, watching the bikers vanish into the night, knowing that in this moment they had both learned something important about strength, family, and standing up for what's right as a E. The rumbling of the bikers' engines faded into the night. Eva and Keanu stood together in the parking lot, the tense air finally beginning to calm. The quiet after the storm was a strange kind of peace, one that both comforted and reminded them of the depth of what had just transpired. Eva took a slow breath, her shoulders relaxing as the adrenaline from the confrontation began to subside. Keanu, ever the calm and grounded figure, stood by her side without saying another word for a moment. He knew how much the situation had rattled her, how deeply she had feared for both herself and for him, but it was clear to him that his mother had just faced down something bigger than any of them had anticipated. "That was something," Eva finally said, breaking the silence. She laughed softly, though the sound was a little shaky. Keanu smiled slightly, his gaze softening as he looked at her. "You handled it well, I'm proud of you." Eva met his eyes, her expression serious, but there was a flicker of something in her gaze, an acknowledgement that she had, indeed, done something she had never imagined herself doing. "I didn't want to have to bring you into this," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "I tried to keep you out of the spotlight, out of all of this madness, but sometimes it feels like it's impossible." Keanu nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. He had lived his entire life under the weight of the public's expectations, the constant scrutiny, and the endless attention that came with being who he was. But his mother, she had tried for years to protect him from it all. She had fought to keep him grounded, to keep their lives as normal as possible in a world that seemed anything but. "Mom, you don't have to apologize," he said, his voice low and steady. "I'm here for you. Always. We've been through a lot together. I'm not going to let anyone mess with you. Ever." Eva smiled at the sincerity in his voice, a warmth filling her chest. The world may have been unpredictable, chaotic, and sometimes dangerous, but in this moment, she knew she had someone who would always have her back no matter what. The world might have forgotten the quiet strength of a mother's love, but Keanu never would. "I know," she said softly, her gaze distant for a moment as she let the emotions of the evening settle inside her. "But I wanted to make sure you didn't have to carry any more of that weight. I wanted to protect you from the dangers of this life, from the mess that comes with fame and all of its complications." Keanu looked down at the ground for a moment, then back up at her. "You've done more than enough, Mom. You taught me how to handle the weight. You taught me what's important, and I'm stronger because of you." Eva's eyes softened as she stepped closer, pulling him into a brief, tight hug. It wasn't just a hug between a mother and son. It was an unspoken promise. They had survived the hardest parts of life together, and nothing would change that. Not even the threats, not even the dangers that loomed just outside their bubble of peace. As they pulled apart, Keanu gave her a playful smile. "But next time, maybe let me handle the bikers." Eva chuckled softly, shaking her head. "We'll see, I might surprise you again." Keanu's grin widened. "I wouldn't be surprised if you did." The two of them stood in the quiet parking lot for a few moments more, just taking in the stillness. The world had gone on around them, unaware of what had just transpired. But, for Eva and Keanu, the events of the night were a stark reminder that sometimes, in order to protect what mattered most, you had to confront things head-on, no matter how uncomfortable or daunting the task might be. And as they walked back toward the car, Eva felt a deep sense of relief wash over her. She had done what she had to do, She had protected herself and her son just like any mother would. "I think I'm going to need a drink after this," Eva said with a smile, her voice light now. Keanu laughed. "I think that's a good idea." As Eva and Keanu drove away from the gas station, the night around them seemed to return to its natural rhythm. The stars above twinkled in the clear sky, and the distant hum of cars on the highway was a reminder that the world continued to turn, even after the chaos they had just faced. Yet something had shifted. The encounter with the bikers, the revelation of who Eva truly was, had left an impression that neither of them would easily forget. The drive home was quiet, save for the occasional hum of the engine and the soft music playing in the background. Keanu glanced over at his mother, who sat beside him, her face still reflecting a mixture of emotions: pride, relief, and a quiet strength that only a mother could possess. Eva had always been the protective one, the shield that kept their family safe, and tonight she had shown just how deep that shield ran. Keanu couldn't help but feel a deep sense of admiration for her. Despite everything, despite the pressure of her own life and the constant fear of what might happen next, she had faced down those bikers without flinching. It was a reminder of the countless sacrifices she had made for him and for their family. Over the years, "Hey, Mom," Keanu said, breaking the silence, "you were amazing back there." Eva turned to him, her lips curling into a small, appreciative smile. "Thank you, Keanu, but I couldn't have done it without you. You were there when I needed you the most." Keanu shook his head. "You were the one who stood tall. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time." Eva reached over and gave his hand a reassuring squeeze. "It's not just about being in the right place, honey. It's about knowing when to stand up for yourself and for the people you love. That's something I've always tried to teach you." Keanu nodded, his thoughts drifting to everything his mother had taught him, about strength, about resilience, and about the power of standing up for what's right. He had learned so much from her, more than he could ever express. "I know," he said quietly, his voice full of gratitude. "I know." As they pulled up to their home, Eva sat in the car for a moment, reflecting on everything that had transpired. She had been through a lot in her life, but she knew this moment would stay with her for a long time. She had faced her fears, confronted danger head-on, and come out stronger on the other side. And in the process, she had shown her son just how important it was to protect the ones you love, no matter the cost. When they finally stepped out of the car, Keanu looked over at his mother with a smile. "You know," he said, "I think we should go inside, have a drink, and maybe even share this story with the world. Let everyone know what happened tonight." Eva laughed softly, the sound light and free. "Maybe. But for now, I think we should keep this one to ourselves. It was our moment, and sometimes those are the best stories of all." Keanu agreed. They didn't need to share everything with the world. Some things were best kept between the two of them, a reminder of the bond they shared, the strength they had found in each other, and the love that had carried them through everything. The following days were quieter. The tension of that fateful night seemed to dissipate as quickly as it had arrived. But for Eva and Keanu, something had fundamentally shifted. It was as if that brief, intense moment had opened a door to a new chapter in their lives. They could no longer ignore the reality of the world they lived in, the unpredictability, the dangers, and the deep underlying truths that would always surround them. Keanu found himself reflecting on what had happened in ways he hadn't anticipated. He had always known his life was different from the average person's, that there were things about his family that set them apart from others. But it wasn't until that night, when he saw the bikers' fear and their hasty retreat, that he truly understood the weight of his name and what it meant for his mother, too. Eva had never been in the limelight like he had, but that didn't mean her life was without scrutiny. She had lived in the shadows of his fame, always a quiet figure behind the scenes, enduring her own share of challenges. Eva, on the other hand, found herself processing the events of the night through a lens of reflection. The encounter with the bikers had reminded her of her own power. For so long, she had been the silent protector, the one who stayed in the background, keeping her family safe from the chaos and noise of the world. But that night, in the face of danger, she had found a different version of herself. Strong, resilient and unafraid to stand her ground. She had spent so many years shielding Keanu from the harshness of the world, but in doing so, she had often forgotten that she too had a voice that could command respect, a voice that could defend what mattered most. "I've been thinking," Eva said one morning as they sat in the kitchen, a cup of coffee in hand. "Maybe it's time I stop hiding behind the scenes so much. Maybe it's time I start speaking up more, not just for myself, but for others, too." Keanu looked at her, his brow raised in curiosity. "What do you mean?" Eva paused, considering her words carefully. "I've spent so much time protecting you, making sure you stayed out of the spotlight, but maybe it's time I used my own voice for good. I've always been behind the scenes, but perhaps that's not enough anymore. People need to know the power of standing up for what's right. I want to teach others that they don't have to hide either." Keanu smiled warmly, feeling proud of his mother for coming to this realization. She had always been strong, but now she was seeing the full extent of her own power. "I think that's a great idea, Mom. The world could use more voices like yours." Eva took a deep breath, the weight of the decision settling on her shoulders. "It's scary though, Keanu. I've always been the one in the background. The thought of stepping into the spotlight is intimidating." Keanu reached over and placed a hand on hers, offering his support. "You don't have to do it alone, and you don't have to be in the spotlight like I am, but your voice matters. And it's time for you to share it. I'll be right here with you every step of the way." Eva smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. Keanu had always been there for her, just as she had been there for him. Together, they had weathered so much, and now they were ready to face whatever came next. The days that followed saw Eva begin to step into her newfound role with cautious optimism. She started speaking out more, attending events, meeting people who shared her passion for helping others, and gradually gaining the confidence to use her voice in ways she never had before. It wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about making a difference, about showing the world that even the quietest voices could have the loudest impact. For Keanu, watching his mother come into her own was an emotional journey. He had always known she was strong, but now he saw a side of her that he hadn't truly appreciated before. She wasn't just his mother anymore. She was a force in her own right, a woman with her own purpose, her own mission. As the weeks passed, they both found a new rhythm, a balance between their lives, their roles, and the challenges they faced. They continued to support each other, and in doing so they discovered that they had both grown in ways they hadn't anticipated. Eva had learned to step into her own light, and Keanu had learned that he wasn't the only one in the family who could stand up and fight for what was right. One evening, as they sat on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Keanu turned to his mother with a thoughtful expression. "You know, I think this was more than just a lesson for the bikers. It was a lesson for us, too." Eva looked at him, curious. "What do you mean?" Keanu smiled. "We've always had each other's backs, but I think we've both learned that we're stronger when we let ourselves be who we really are. When we stop hiding and start embracing what we've been given. It's not just about protecting each other. It's about showing up for each other every single day." Eva nodded, a smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "I think you're right, Keanu. We've always been a team, but now we're more than that. We're two people with our own voices, our own power." They sat in comfortable silence for a few moments, letting the weight of their conversation settle in. The night was calm, the world around them still, and for the first time in a long time, Eva felt a deep sense of peace. It had been several months since that fateful night at the gas station, and life had, in many ways, returned to a new kind of normal for Eva and Keanu. The initial rush of events had faded, but the changes it sparked in them were profound. The bikers' confrontation had been an intense moment, but it had also been a catalyst for something much bigger, something neither of them could have anticipated. For Eva, the quiet, unassuming life she had always led was no longer enough. She wasn't just Keanu's mother anymore. She was Eva, a woman with a voice, with opinions, and with the ability to make a difference. She had begun speaking at local community events, sharing her story with others, and encouraging women, mothers, and everyday people to stand up for themselves. She felt a sense of fulfillment she hadn't realized she was missing, knowing that She was no longer just protecting the ones she loved, but also using her strength to help others. Keanu, too, had changed. Watching his mother step into her own had sparked something within him. He had always admired her strength, but now he saw her with a new level of respect. She wasn't just a silent protector. She was a force to be reckoned with in her own right. And that, in turn, had encouraged him to reflect on his own path. He began to take his own advocacy for others more seriously. While he had always been passionate about using his fame for good, seeing his mother take charge had motivated him to use his platform more intentionally, to amplify voices that were often overlooked. He knew they had a unique opportunity to make a difference, and now they were both determined to do so. One quiet evening, as they sat together on the couch, Eva turned to Keanu with a thoughtful look. "You know, Keanu, this whole experience has taught me something important. I think I've spent so many years focused on protecting you that I forgot to protect myself in some ways. I think I've also neglected the things that I care about, the things I'm passionate about, because I was so focused on being your shield." Keanu looked at her, a soft smile playing at the corners of his lips. "I get that, Mom. But you've always been my shield in so many ways. You've been my rock. But now I get to see you as something even more, someone who's not afraid to stand up and show the world who you really are." Eva paused, letting his words sink in. She had always thought of herself as the one who had to protect, the one who had to keep everything together. But now she realized that in stepping out of the shadows, she had given herself the freedom to live more authentically, to take her place in the world as herself, not just as someone's mother, not just as a quiet bystander. "I think I'm starting to understand that," she said softly. "It's not about protecting you anymore, Keanu. It's about us standing together. And that's the most important thing. We've always had each other's backs, but now we're walking side by side." Keanu's smile widened, and he reached over to squeeze her hand. "Yeah, side by side. That's what we've always done, and now we get to do it even more." Eva leaned back into the couch, feeling a sense of peace settle over her. She had finally realized that the strength she had always relied on to protect her family was not just about keeping them safe from harm. It was about helping them grow, empowering them to face the world with confidence. And in doing so, she had found her own voice and her own sense of purpose. The next morning, Keanu stood beside his mother as they prepared to attend an event together. This time, Eva wasn't just a guest. She was a speaker. She was ready to share her journey, her lessons learned, and her hope for the future. Keanu, as always, would be by her side, supporting her in every way possible. It was a full-circle moment, a moment of realization that this journey they had been on together was far from over. It was just the beginning. As they stepped out the door, Keanu looked at his mom and gave her a wink. "You ready for this?" Eva laughed, a sound of pure confidence. "I think I've been ready my whole life." And with that, they walked together into the future, stronger than ever before.